China is expanding its presence in the Middle East, both diplomatically and militarily. What is it trying to accomplish, and how should the U.S. react? Earlier, we spoke with a China expert who tells us the U.S. has lost credibility in the region and needs to regain it. James Gorey, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
My pleasure, Tiffany. Good to be here.
All eyes seem to be on the Middle East as the Israel-Hamas war continues. Now, there's been growing calls for a ceasefire, especially from the U.S., but also China. Is China trying to become a peace broker here?
Well, they're trying to become a power player, a peace broker on one side, probably, a Hamas side. Doesn't look like they're in favor of the Israeli cause so much. But yes, they're definitely trying to become a bigger player, a power player, challenging the U.S. in the Middle East. The Belt and Road Initiative is not just an economic trade route. It's a projection of culture, of power, of control, and so they're following that up with now the military piece of that. And so they don't exist, in a vacuum. They're part of the same program. So what it is China asserting itself in the Middle East, and the U.S. is having a very difficult time projecting its power or even convincing people that it is the relevant power to deal with.
Expanding on that last point, how did Beijing become the one to broker that so-called peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran? Why wasn't it the U.S.?
That's a great question. I think it does stem from the fact that China's naval power and economic power are expanding, whereas the U.S. naval power is shrinking. 20 years ago, China had a 37-ship Navy. Not that impressive. Well, their Navy is now 10 times the size, and the U.S. Navy is shrinking. China has more naval ships than we do, and it's a good question strategically whether we can actually defend Taiwan. So China is making moves in the Middle East. They're buying a lot of oil, and they're helping these countries get around U.S. sanctions, particularly Iran. So those nations see China as a force to be dealt with and a force to be aligned with. And they don't see the U.S. as having that much effect, especially given the fact that this Israeli-Hamas war, that's promoting a schism between these countries in terms of how they view the U.S., which is pro-Israel typically, versus how they view China, which is typically much more aligned with the Arab nations around it.